Welcome to Art Ed Radio, the podcast for art teachers. This show is produced by the Art of Education, and I'm your host, Tim Bogatz. I want you to take a second and think about the messiest, most disorganized art room you can think of. Okay, close your eyes and picture it. Or maybe don't close your eyes if you listen to this on your commute. You know what I'm talking about. It is just a mess. Okay? And some people do well in that situation. Okay? I definitely do not. And I think most people do not. So we need to talk about how to keep your art room a little bit cleaner or a little bit more organized. Or at the very least, keep it from getting trashed. And let me ask you this. Do you know an art teacher who has a room that appears to be a total disaster, but somehow they always know where everything is? For me, that is my friend Abby Schukei. And also Andrew McCormick, come to think of it. How am I always drawing to, talking to, and hanging out with the messiest art teachers around? But I'll digress. This episode is actually inspired by Abby, and she's going to be my guest today. I was in her room not too long ago, and I was fascinated about how she was just at home in an art room that I could not handle on a daily basis. So we talked about how we're at our best in totally different situations. And no matter the difference in what you like in your room, you can't allow it to ever get completely trashed. And we decided that the conversation might make for a good podcast episode. So here we are. And she was kind enough to let me film some videos in her room and kind enough to give me some of her time coming on the show now. And of course, I'm repaying her by telling the world how disorganized her classroom is. And I don't think I'll get inside her head about why she does so well with a messy room, but I do think she'll have some good tips on how to keep things from getting too bad, and maybe even the best way to keep things organized, if, you're inclined to do that sort of thing. And I think we need to have that conversation, because teaching art involves just so much stuff, like so much physical stuff. And because of that, there are going to be times when the art room is just a disaster. And no matter your organization style, there are just times when it gets ugly in the art room. And we're going to chat about how to keep that from happening, how to keep it from happening too often, and how to keep it from getting too bad when it does occur. Sometimes it's the kids, sometimes it's the teacher, sometimes the custodian that makes things a mess. Usually the kids. Okay. But some art teachers are at their best in that disorganized situation. But I think most are not. And that's why today, Abby and I are going to talk about how we can get our kids and ourselves to quit trashing the art room. All right. I am here with Abby Schukei. Abby, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I am doing really well. We have a lot to discuss about terrible, disgusting art rooms, of which yours is one.
Tim!
Just to let everybody know, I recorded some Art Ed Pro videos in Abby's classroom last weekend, and I get the distinct feeling that her custodian hates her. So, Abby, first question, how does your custodian feel about you and your art room?
Okay, well, before I answer that question, I would just like the record to show that some of us live we thrive in a setting of organized chaos, which is what I do, okay? So, it's just the way my mind works, and we'll get into that later. But to answer your question, so the custodian question is actually a pretty awkward question, because I'm just going through a custodian transition. My main guy, he did everything for me. He was a rock star. Recently left, so I'm got a new custodian, and I'm trying to win her heart, but I just quite haven't gotten there yet. But I will tell you that I don't think with the custodian thing, for some reason, my students have this philosophy that it's the custodian's job to clean up their mess. So we're trying to get through that a little bit. I don't know, papers on the floor, they just are kind of lazy when they don't go and pick those things up. So I'm really trying to get in the good graces of my custodian here, so I'm working towards it. So I can't really answer that right now.
Okay, fair enough. And I will say, like, teenagers are self-centered, and it's really tough to get them to, realize that, hey, sometimes they need to take responsibility for, their mess and for everything that's going on in the room, everything that's theirs. So, let me ask you though, like, as your room starts to get a little bit messy, hey, how do you feel about that? And then are you the type of teacher that needs to have things clean every single day? Or do you wait until it gets out of hand and then just go crazy with a cleaning day? Or are you kind of somewhere in between?
Definitely somewhere in between. There's obviously some things that absolutely need to be done every day. Kids need to pick up the floor. They need to wash out their paintbrushes. They need to, if we're doing, I'm envisioning my counter right now, and we're working on a painting project. So there's tons of paint out and things like that, and the counter is full. But that's okay, because I'm not going to put everything away every day because we're using it. Here in a few days, when we're all done with that, we will do kind of a deep clean of everything. So, you do little cleanings as you go, and then kind of deep scrub, deep clean kind of at the end. And I definitely take an entire day to do that when we are done with clay. Yes. I have kids wipe off their clay tools and things like that after every time we use them, but we all know that they're not as clean as they should be. So it takes an army, and I get like drill sergeant-ish on those days where it's like, okay, guys, you made this mess. Let's go. And it's actually surprising that if you ask a student to just wash out their paintbrush on a normal day, they'll probably complain about it. But those days that you have an entire day to clean, some kids are just like, yes, this is the best thing ever. And I think it's because the art room is, well, maybe just my art room, it's so dirty sometimes that you can like visually see it getting clean. And I'm always shocked when kids are like that, but
Yeah, I don't know why they get so excited to do that, but, I know there are some people, like, they just have the personality where they think better and they work better if things are clean. And so there's this stress level that builds up every single day that they're in this, like, messy room, this chaotic room.
Are you one of those people?
No, I'm not. I can handle a little mess, but then, like, when things just get really clean, it's just like this catharsis for them. They just, like, exhale, and, like, it's so much more relaxing for them.
Yeah, I don't know what that would feel like.
Now, I want to ask you though, like, you talked a little bit about kids getting excited about that, but it's really tough to do on like a daily basis. So I want to, I guess, ask about motivations. Like, do you give kids a reward for doing cleanup well, or some other kind of incentive? Or is it more of just a basic expectation that you need to clean this, and this before you go every day?
Well, it's certainly a basic expectation, but we all know that our students don't always follow our expectations. So that is one thing, like at the end of class, if it's whether put your stools up on the table or whatever they need to do and they're not doing it, then, you might kind of have to do something to incentivize it a little bit. I don't necessarily reward them because it's something like they should clean up their own mess. But, it might be something where you are all going to stay after. Like, you will not leave this room after the bell rings until everything is put away. Like, pick 3 things up off the floor. Even in middle school, I still have kids come up to me and show me, here are my 3 things. My 3. I'm like, okay, cool. But, you kind of do have to do that. The only time I really reward kids is if, like, something really needs to be clean, and it's usually actually not my classroom students, like my homeroom students or something like that. I'll give them our school PBIS card. That's, they can cash it in for some things. I'll be like, I'll give you 3 of these if you do this job. And they usually do it. But other than that, it really does need to be, it's an expectation of my students to do that. It's their mess, their responsibility to do that.
Yeah. And I'm the same way where on a daily basis, you need to have kids keeping things clean before it does get out of hand. But then like those deep cleaning days, that's when I bring incentives in, where I'll have 2 lists on the board. Like one is just, here's what has to be done. Like these are the required things just to get the room clean. And then I usually have like the second list, which if you want some candy, do these things, and they'll be like the really gross jobs, like scraping the bottom of the sink or like, cleaning the countertops, like all the dried paint, just those really like difficult jobs that nobody really wants to do. And so, yeah, well, I'll trade in, a handful of candy for those good jobs. It really is. So, if I don't have to stay after school to clean stuff, or if I don't want to get my custodian angry at me, like that's worth a couple Snickers and a small pack of Skittles.
Agreed.
Like, yeah. Okay, so just kind of moving on, just bringing attention to, the mess that's there and kids' responsibilities. You see all these super cutesy things, like you have the paintbrush graveyard and like people hold funerals for their markers and things like that. Do you think that brings the right type of attention to the issue of cleanup? Or do you think that kind of stuff is really received as more silly and kind of keeps kids from thinking that it's a big deal?
I think it does kind of keep kids away from thinking it's a big deal, because it is funny, maybe theirs gets to be added to the graveyard or whatnot. I'm sure it can be effective if you're putting in classroom, your expectations and your management of the classroom, if there's maybe a consequence for when that does happen. Like I know one of the things that I do in my classroom, and it always seems to be paintbrushes. A kid forgets to clean out a paintbrush. I do not leave paintbrushes out anymore. I actually assign them to my students where they'll get like 3 different ones, like maybe a big, small, medium one, or just kind of depending on what they need. They want a different one, they can trade it in, but they store those in their art bins the entire semester. If they lose it, if they don't forget to wash it, or if they forget to wash it out, they're out of luck. The graveyard is probably them because, I'm not going to give them another one. And I've really seen a difference in kids taking care of paintbrushes that way. I don't have to, I used to at the end of class, wash them out. And now I don't have to do that anymore because kids are like, okay, this is all that I need to do. Mm-hmm. My favorite is when you pull open a bin of a kid that didn't wash it out. And then the next day I'm like, where'd you get that brush from? Or, something like that. And so, they can take others' brushes sometimes, but that's a good way, I think, to, if you don't want to have to deal with all that stuff, put more responsibility in for your students that way.
Yeah, I'm a huge proponent of that. And I actually started that one year when I didn't have any budget money. And I realized, guys, there's no way I'm going to be able to order any more brushes. Like, this is what we have for the whole year. And so I'm like, you get 2, you get 2, you get 2. And, and then I started to realize, oh, hey, this really works. And it's a great strategy. So, you've mentioned a couple times kind of getting kids involved. How do you think you can get them more involved in cleanup? How can you keep them from trashing the art room? Like, is it a matter of, hey, pick up your 3 things, or does it go beyond that?
It certainly does go beyond that for me. I hate it. I have tons of cupboards in my classroom, and I have them separated out by periods, like who is in what. That's where they store their things. Yeah. And, I know when the first period class left their cupboard open, because they're the only ones that were in there. And it's just simple things like that, like shut the door. There'll be some sort of consequence the next day when they come in. It's usually a cleaning consequence that's not so fantastic. It's like, okay, we're going to take the first 5 minutes to get this task done. So we do something like that. I also have some fun things set up in my classroom. Like I have a basketball hoop above my trash can. Because, students throw paper towels into the trash can all the time because they're too lazy to get up. I'm too lazy to get up sometimes. If it's over there, it's like, and then you miss and you're like, no. But in my classroom, if you do miss, and there's actually a video on AOE that kind of shows that a little bit. And so we can maybe link that in here. But there is a consequence for students. So it's an immediate job where maybe they have to sweep the floor or wash out the sinks. They have to do something. And it's usually pretty effective because all of their classmates rat them out the second that somebody misses. It's like kind of a big deal. So it's kind of a fun way to get them involved. But then after a while, it's not so fun anymore. And they stop shooting those paper towels into the trash cans.
Yeah, so I love that idea, by the way. But then just kind of moving beyond that, beyond those kind of fun and game sort of things, do you think that you can, I guess, get kids to like honestly take ownership of the art room and caring for the art room? Or is that always going to be something that needs to be influenced by the teacher? And I guess if you do think that you can get kids to take ownership, like what are some of the strategies you use to get them to that point?
I think it's always going to start out teacher directed, always. But eventually, if you can really get students to care about what they're doing, they will take ownership in that. And that's simply just by giving them the responsibility in the first place. So I came from elementary school, and it's a little bit different. You do a lot more things for your students just because they can't handle them. Or we think they can't handle them, and so we do not teach them the proper ways to do that. Are you actually going over to the sink or making a video so everybody can see about how to properly wash out a paintbrush? It's things like that. Anytime I just see a student just running it under the sink, it's like, you need to scrub it out somehow,
Yes.
like in your hand on the bottom of the sink. So I use those teaching moments for that. And I think students will start to do that. And you have to be willing to kind of give over the reins to your students a little bit. And you do have to enforce consequences with that. If students are not putting the pencils back or the markers away, then just don't give any more. I mean, you just can't replace those things. And when they're gone, they're gone. And sometimes I think that's kind of the most powerful way to get students to realize, like, oh, I do need to take care of this stuff. She's not going to do it for me.
Yes.
So.
And, just to add one thing to that, I think with older kids, especially with my high schoolers, you can encourage them and kind of coach them to take leadership roles in that too. Just, calling kids out if they see them not putting things away. Like, hey, these are the only supplies we have. Make sure you get your crap done. Like, do what you're supposed to do. And I think if you can kind of empower kids, like you were talking about, to take responsibility for those things, then I think it's can make a huge difference in your room, and it makes your life so much easier if you can get your kids kind of taking the lead on some of that stuff. But one last question for you. Let's get people out of here with some actionable items. Like, what can people do to get kids to quit trashing the art room? Like, what would be your top 3 tips that help you keep the room clean?
Number 1, give your students responsibility with materials. That would be the first one. I would assign materials, like we talked about the paintbrushes. Obviously, you can't do that with everything, but kind of some of those may be tricky areas that you seem to always be having to replace or take care of more. Maybe start with those materials first. And lastly, I know that I'm not always the best at this, but be a good example yourself. Put things away if you want your students to do that. We all know that actions speak louder than words. So you have to be a good example for your students.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think I agree with those. I'm going to add just one more. I think labels are the biggest help. Like, if you can label, here's where glue goes, here's where erasers go, here's where pencils need to be put away. That's such a huge help for kids. Just because then they're not confused. They're not walking around, wandering around like, I don't know where to put the markers. Like, there's a giant cabinet that says markers on it. Send them over there. And yeah, it's going to make your life a lot easier.
Yeah. Well, one last thing that I just remembered. I recently just got a pegboard, like a big metal one, drilled into my wall, kind of for everyday items that we use all the time. And that's been a lifesaver. So if you can get one of those, do it. It really, really seems to help.
I love that. So what kind of stuff do you have on there?
So I have my pencils that I have feathers taped onto that the students, those are just their ones that they can take. Scissors. I have glue sticks, which we don't really use that much. I don't know why I have them in there. Glue sticks, but kind of our black Sharpies go there, our colorful Sharpies, and then our crappy colored pencils. So I keep the Prismacolors put away, but then kind of the waxier colored pencils that just kind of for everyday use, if they just need to brainstorm something in their sketchbook, those kind of materials are there. And it's really easy for kids to access them because it's kind of like the main point where they're at, kind of the everyday materials there. So that helps out a lot.
Yeah, that's awesome advice. Good idea. And probably a good last bit of help for people before we get out of here. So, Abby, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much for joining me, and best wishes on getting your room clean.
I'll do my best. Thanks.
As Abby said, she thrives in organized chaos. That's never going to be me. But I will say that no matter the situation and no matter how much of a mess you can deal with, you're probably going to be a little bit better off, and your kids are going to be better off if you can get things a little more clean, a little more organized. So I hope some of the tips we talked about here can help you in that regard. And before we go, I want to remind you again about Art Ed Pro. Like I said earlier, Abby and I both filmed some new learning packs for Pro that'll be out in the fall, and it's always a great experience. I told you last week too about how a lot of different teachers are getting Pro subscriptions paid for by their schools. Hey, there's PD money out there. Your administrators know how to access it, and some of them are actually buying subscriptions for their teachers instead of textbooks. And seriously, Pro is going to be so much more valuable than those textbooks that are just going to sit on your shelf and not get used. Districts all over the country are finally realizing this, and hopefully yours can get on board as well. So if you have an admin that you want to talk to, you want to look into getting a subscription, they can check it out at theartofed.com/pro for schools. All right, that is it for this week. Andrea Sluzarski will be back on the show next week to try to convince me that watercolor painting and teaching watercolors is actually enjoyable. It's going to be a tough sell, but hopefully an enjoyable episode. That'll be out next Tuesday, but until then, use what we talked about today and go teach your kids how to not trash your art room. Art Ed Radio is produced by the Art of Education with audio engineering from Michael Crocker. Our email list has exploded over the past few weeks with all kinds of new people signing up. They obviously want my witty opinions and my sardonic humor in their inbox every single week. So if you want to get in on that as well, make sure you go sign up at artedradio.com. Thanks for listening, and we will talk to you next week.